These are the fields of northern France, in many ways unchanged since the Middle Ages. Imagine with me living in France 700 years ago and setting off on a pilgrimage to perhaps the most famous place of worship in the world, Chartres Cathedral. All day long it draws you toward it, growing larger and larger, still looming in the distance like a vision. Overcome with emotion, you are certain that this must be the most splendid place on earth. This must truly be the palace of God. Just as it must have been in the 12th century, Chartres remains an incredible sight. Chartres was built by people very similar to those of Beaulieu, and although the story of Beaulieu is made up, it is based on many of the cathedrals we'll be seeing. Even to our modern eyes, which have seen towering skyscrapers, indoor stadiums, jumbo jets, and space shuttles, the Gothic cathedrals still inspire awe. There's no other word for it. They are so enormous and so obviously dangerous and expensive to construct that we have to ask, how were they built?
Yes, and why? Because though they are marvelous of engineering, that alone doesn't tell us the story about Gothic cathedrals. One of the things that makes them different from castles and pyramids and ancient Roman cities is that after 700 years, the great Gothic cathedrals are still in use.
And for their original purpose.
Cathedrals have always functioned as parish churches for local inhabitants. But they were also much more. The word cathedral comes from the Latin cathedra, meaning the throne of the bishop. And most cathedrals are still the bishop's churches, the administrative centers of their diocese, and the spiritual centers for entire regions. Places large enough to hold the many thousands who still visit them every year.
Aside from being a spiritual center, the cathedral became the focus of city life. Not only did it symbolize prosperity and civic pride, it also served as a magnet for trade and commerce. Its images found their way onto stained glass, coins, seals, and all manner of medieval souvenirs, much like today.
If you lived in the Middle Ages, almost since birth you would have been taught that God was the most important force in your life, and that everything around you, the change of seasons, the sun and the rain, the sowing and reaping of your crops, even war and famine and untimely death, all of this was merely the working out of God's plan. Heaven and hell were real, just as real and literal as the wind and the cold, the fields and the animals. Religious faith was the dominant motivating factor behind everything. The church brought you into the world, and it took you out of this world and into the next. Between baptism and last rites, you depended upon the church for education and religious instruction, for confession, absolution and communion. for keeping legal documents such as wills and marriage contracts, and for help and support when you needed it. Down through the centuries, the cathedrals are where people have celebrated their own lives and remembered the lives of others. And the building of each cathedral was a saga of struggle and ingenuity, of heroes and villains, bishops and kings, and people who in many ways were like each of us.